SRE. Cloud recording has started, and so we're ready to go. Thank you very much for your time and for coming along to hear our gathered folks speak today. We should start with a round of introductions. I should introduce myself. I'm Lee Beddoes. I'm the Regional Manager for Post-Sales for Datadog across Europe and Asia Pacific. Joining me today from Google, we have Yuri. Yuri, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Yuri Grinshteyn. I'm part of the customer reliability engineering team here at Google Cloud. We're a team of Google SREs, but instead of working on internal systems, we work with Google Cloud customers to help them adopt SRE practices and achieve the appropriate level of reliability.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks for being here. From Datadog, we have Damien. Damien.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Damien. I work at Datadog. I'm the engineering manager for the Core Resilience org. And in the Core Resilience org, our goal is to prepare Datadog as much as possible for the unknown unknowns. We want to be as ready as possible for anything that happens, basically. And we do this by owning the production readiness review process, the incident response and remediation process, building a chaos engineering platform, which we recently open sourced, and using it to run large-scale game days where we create failure in a controlled environment, and try to learn from it. And finally, yeah, we also build a lot of production support tooling to ease the life of engineers that are going on call at Datadog.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Damien. And last but definitely not least, from Vodafone, we have Llywelyn.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Lee. Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Llywelyn Griffith-Swain. You might hear people call me Welly. I don't mind either one. So I'm an SRE Manager here at Vodafone UK. I look after our resiliency, release, and performance engineering teams. So that's essentially the functioning, shipping, and running of code across all of the environments, and really excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great stuff. So that is our panel. We'd like to start today with really an introduction to the principles of SRE by the folks that invented it. Yuri, would you care to start us off and to present?
I would love to. Can you confirm that you can see my slides okay?
You can indeed.
Excellent. So let's get started. I've already introduced myself, so no need to go through that again. But before we dive in to site reliability engineering, or SRE principles, I think it's important to get on the same page as to what we mean when we say reliability. What does reliability actually mean? Well, it certainly includes preventing outages and crashing like these that make their way into the papers and can have an immediate impact on your business. But the costs of unreliable systems extend far beyond the big outages. There's a study that I saw last year that showed that a team of 10 engineers will spend about $300,000 US worth of their time each year on troubleshooting and incident management. There's another study that says that investing in reliability can help you improve or protect up to another 1.2 million US dollars each year. So the key thing that SRE believes is that reliability is a key feature of your service, maybe the most important feature, right? Which means you have to treat it like every other feature of your service. You have to prioritize it, you have to work on it. You can't just take it for granted. And so, let's see, in order to do that, we have to measure reliability, right? So how do we measure reliability, right? This is sort of the traditional, maybe a bit of a naive way to do it. So you look at uptime. How much of the time were things good and how much of the time things were bad, right? This is pretty easy to understand and fairly easy to measure for things that are sort of continuous and binary, like a server. But it's a little difficult to do that for distributed systems, systems where there are sort of different modes of failure where things could degrade but not be a hard down, right? So for more distributed, more complex systems, we need sort of a more fancy definition of reliability that can also handle partially up, partially degraded, and measure the quality of the service that you're delivering under any circumstances. But the basic requirement here is really the same, right? We need a definition for reliability and we need a way to measure it, okay? So then our next step is to have a reliability goal, which is essentially a certain amount of reliability that we're trying to reach, and then inversely, sort of the amount of unreliability that our service can tolerate to still keep our users happy, right? I'm sure you've heard of the terms, 3 nines, 4 nines, right? Really, we're looking at that first column, which is what is the level of reliability of our service over a given time window, Okay. This sort of interaction or event-based model also allows us to evaluate, how much of the time can the service be sort of have a hard down, but also for how long can we serve a partially degraded experience or an increased error rate and still remain within our availability target, right? So now this gives us more nuance, more room to maneuver. We can measure, brownouts or sort of degraded experience and not treat them as 100% down. Now, one question you may be asking yourself here is, hey, this table goes down to 5 nines. Where's 100%? Well, a key realization that we had here at Google, and especially Ben Traynor-Sloss, who is sort of credited with founding SRE here at Google, is that 100% is the wrong reliability target for everything, right? And there's 2 primary reasons for that. The first reason is that by and large, your users will never perceive your service to be 100% reliable because the connection mechanism that they use to reach the service is not going to be 100% reliable, right? So if they're using your service over the public internet, here in the US at least, we know our internet service is almost never 100% reliable. Things are generally somewhat better in EMEA, but nevertheless, users will never perceive your service to be 100% reliable because their connection is not going to be 100% reliable. It also costs you more and more to move up that reliability chart. And at some point, you reach an inflection point where additional reliability doesn't actually benefit your users anymore. And now you're spending money to increase reliability that you could be spending on features or other things that will actually make users happy. All right. So if 100% is the wrong target, we know that our target should be set somewhere below 100%. And that difference of between 100% and our actual reliability target is what's called the error budget, right? That is the amount of unavailability that we're willing to tolerate within our service to still keep our users happy and still achieve the goals that our service is built for, right? We can actually measure how much of our error budget is still remaining at any given time over that evaluation period. And once we know how much we have, we can then choose how we spend that budget. And we can spend it on either doing things that will increase risk or essentially improve the velocity of how we ship features and how fast we ship things in our service. And all of those things will carry risk of unreliability with them. Or if we see that we're starting to trend toward running out of our error budget, we can then reprioritize our work and focus on doing things that will improve the reliability of our service and hopefully regain some of that error budget, right? So this is really powerful because this gives us an objective way to measure reliability and determine whether or not the reliability of our service is good enough. And when you start measuring and enforcing error budgets, you'll find that both folks in development and folks in SRE or ops are motivated to balance development velocity with reliability, right? You get both sides working together, and development is now empowered to manage this risk themselves. They can know at any given point how much error budget is remaining, what is the planned risk of a particular change, and that essentially gives them an automatic green light to push the change if sufficient error budget is available. At the same time, it gives the right signal to SRE to say, hey, we have plenty of error budget left, so we can do things that are more risky, like, for example, do some of the kind of resilience testing that was brought up earlier, or no, we're really tight on error budget right now, so we're really need to focus on shipping only the key things and invest in our effort in regaining error budget by improving the reliability of the service. So how do we actually do this? What are the terms that we use? Okay, this is how we sort of put this in practice. We start by defining what we call the SLI, the service level indicator. This is a measurement, right? It'll tell you for any moment in time whether your service is is sort of reliable enough. It's a thing you actually measure. Maybe your error rate, maybe latency, but essentially your proxy for user happiness. The SLO, a service level objective, is the goal for the aggregate of your metric over a given window of time, right? It's the sort of mathematical bound of the error budget. It says, over this window of time, this is my target. The amount by which I exceed my target is my remaining budget. I often hear folks conflate or confuse SLOs and SLAs. SLAs are also a reliability target, but they're really set by the business with customers as legal contracts. because they typically specify the consequences you're going to incur if you don't miss specific reliability targets, such as give people money back. For internal operational concerns, your SLA is certainly useful because it does tell you when you're really in trouble. But typically, you're going to have an SLO that is going to be much tighter than your SLA because you never really want to get to a point you're operating your service at a place where it starts to lose money, right? So where do you define these targets? How do you define your SLOs? Well, as you can imagine, this is actually pretty complex, right? I can't really describe all the nuances in this sort of very brief slot, but the important thing that we really recommend to our customers is that start with something, right? Start with a simple SLO, for example, just availability over a rolling 28-day window, and then iterate it over time, right? It's totally fine to start with a primitive metric just to set some initial priorities and then decide what you want to do, right? But how you actually do this is really a matter of communication across all the different roles that are involved in the reliability of your service and balancing trade-offs, right? All of these groups are going to be stakeholders, right? And you kind of, as you start with, the folks in operations, the ones that are actually carrying the pager, right? They're very sort of in close proximity to the service because they're the ones who are going on call, responding to the pagers, right? And so as you start to push the levels of reliability higher, you start to push their human limits and the ability of the technology to deliver higher reliability. On the other hand, as your reliability levels or reliability requirements are lower, then it basically means that there are many fewer incidents, and then their on-call skills and on-call knowledge really starts to degrade. And so the same kind of parameters apply to folks in development, folks in product, right? These are the constraints that you operate under. And it's certainly reasonable to invest engineering time in moving these constraints in either direction to give yourself more room to work with. But these are the kinds of concerns that go into setting your SLOs, right? So ultimately, what we believe here at Google, what we have seen is that in order for SLOs and air budgets to be effective, they require buy-in from multiple parts of the organization. They require buy-in from the business that sets business objectives. They require buy-in from development, who has to agree to reprioritize work on features versus reliability. And they require buy-in from operations or SRE, right? So now you're bridging all these different domains, and you're giving them a common language around reliability. And that's kind of the real objective of SRE in general, and then sort of our founding and animating principle, which is air budgets.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for that context and for that detail of the principles behind this SRE. And so just building on that directly, Yuri, from the customers that you've dealt with, I suppose, the impetus for those customers to take this journey and move in this direction, what are the common threads that you see as the reasons behind people starting down this journey of using that approach to define how they operate and how they are going to expect their business to behave?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've seen folks come at this from actually two different directions. The first one is exactly what you would expect, which is they want to improve the reliability of the service. They have too many incidents. Their customers are unhappy. Folks are sort of struggling to keep the service up and running. And so what they need to say, like, we know our service needs to be more reliable, but we don't really know what that means. We know it's not good enough now, but we don't really know what good enough is. And so we need to figure out how to get there, which is let's set a target with an SLO and let's work toward that. The other side of it is folks will say, well, our service is reliable enough. We're able to, achieve our reliability targets. Our users aren't complaining. We're making money and all of that. But it's, we know that we can't sustain this with the amount of work that it takes today. Our operations team is essentially in full-on incident response mode at all times. We never have time to do anything else. We don't have time to build the service out to scale. We know that if we see sufficient user growth or sufficient traffic increase, we're going to be in trouble because we're just going to have to, we're basically having to linearly scale operational staff with traffic. And so that's unsustainable. So we need a way to, to allow folks to spend some time on engineering projects that will actually allow the service to scale with users without having to scale the folks that it takes to run the service. And the only way we can do that is to essentially say, well, we're going to have an SLO, and if we're within SLO, essentially, then that gives folks the ability to work on engineering projects to, for example, do better failover, to do more automated rollbacks, to improve our alerting and monitoring, to improve our observability, such that people aren't constantly digging through logs, those kinds of things. So in my experience, those are the two main points where people are coming at this from. One is we're not reliable enough and we need to get better. And the other one is we're reliable enough, but it's way too difficult.
Okay, that makes total sense. And so, Damien, coming to you kind of from Datadog's point of view and from the experience you've had, do any of that resonate as the reasons why Datadog went in this direction?
I mean, definitely, mostly on the second point that you made, Yuri. But I really want to say that at Datadog, the reliability has been central to the product in our line of business, obviously. So we've been investing in reliability a lot since we started the company. But it's since a few years we've discussed a lot with Google once the SRE handbook was published, and we started looking into how we could take a few of the concepts inside the book and adapt it to the culture that we have at Datadog, the engineering culture that we have at Datadog. We believe that there's a lot of tools in that book. They are great tools, and we just wanted to cherry pick a few of them and implement them into our own. We have a really strong you build it, you manage, you run it model at Datadog. So for example, we don't have development teams or software engineering teams that hand over some software, hand over the pager into an SRE team. And this is one of the big differences that we have with the Google implementation, or at least the Google handbook for SRE.
Great stuff. And so coming to you, Welly, how does that resonate with the situation that Vodafone finds itself in that your business, as I know quite well, is not solely a technology-focused and software delivery business? It has practical elements to it, and telecoms and sales and retail. How did that journey begin for you?
Yeah, so no, it's a good question. So essentially, so we obviously started in kind of physical, infrastructure based on data centers. Obviously, we're traditionally a telco. Recently, we've got the initiative though to transition into a telecoms company, into a technology communications company. So that's where the big kind of focus on software engineering comes into it. And the best place to start with is obviously the website. So from our perspective, in early 2018, we kind of started our DevOps journey. We in-housed a lot of our development teams, and kind of the need for SRE came kind of a bit more organically, because the question was, well, how can we deliver even faster? And a part of that was not only obviously introducing kind of those guardrails with kind of SLOs and SLIs, but also kind of setting up a systems engineering in order to enable the teams so we would provision the underlying infrastructure like VPCs and things like that they would build on, but still enabling the developers to own their code, including the infrastructure that it runs on. So there came that kind of point of critical mass where we kind of decided, well, actually, if we followed SRE in order to enable that DevOps adoption, it would help us deliver in a faster and a better rate.
Nice. That makes sense. If you've got a documented set of principles that somebody as successful and big as Google has proposed and put out there, then as a model to follow, it's a good one. Yeah, that makes total sense. And so, in terms of the practical first steps that were taken, you mentioned there that there was the understanding and the desire to move in that direction as part of the, make the DevOps culture as a pinnacle part of that. In terms of the actual practical, I always ask this question when we're doing these sessions, because it means that then people who are listening, who may be going down this journey themselves or thinking about how could they get their business to think about making the move in this direction, kind of what was the practical first step that allowed you and the team that you were in and part of and running to make the step in the direction of let's found the SRE principles as the major part of what we do?
Yeah, so to be honest, I think it was the results as to which we've had. So I mentioned before that there's a question was asked around how could you deliver faster, and it kind of came to us as a way of, well, the developers are spending quite a bit of time doing infrastructure, but also having to understand quite a bit about it, like networking, how things are coming into us. Yeah. And ultimately, there was a centralized team that was doing that, but one of the kind of key pillars of DevOps is around that kind of ownership and having that end to end. So although we were bringing that in, as I mentioned, we kind of hit that critical mass where essentially, we needed something in order to help them so that the developers could deploy onto a platform, but they wouldn't necessarily have to deploy that themselves. So that was kind of where it came from, but we were fortunate enough that we already had, like, kind of, as I said, started our DevOps journey. So we already increased. We'd gone from, quarterly releases to releases every week. Bearing in mind this was, 3 years ago, but even just that and showing the rate that we were able to change, from not only taking up like agile working practices, but also kind of insourcing a lot of the development aspects of things, it really kind of helped us show the difference that we were having. And through that, it kind of really enabled us so that when we did have that conversation about, right, let's bring up SRE, it was something that was actually really well received.
And did this come at the same time? I mean, you mentioned they're in-housing the development and those bits. Did this come at the same time as a focus on the number of human beings you had in the teams to do the role? Did you build the team in the shape of the principles you wanted to deliver, or build, expand a team that was already there to do it?
Yeah, no, so we started very small. So we only started with like four people. We had two very small teams. It was 4 and then 8 people. We started out doing things like one of them was building like infrastructure templates that the development teams could copy and have in their repositories. Didn't have to write them themselves. Obviously, they still have to understand how it works because their apps run there. And then we had another team that was focusing kind of the telemetry aspects. And then as those continued and we delivered upon them, we then grew. So the people who wrote the infrastructure templates then wrote proper, true ISC environments. The people that delivered the telemetry then went forward to CI/CD, single path to production, and things like that. So it kind of really started small with small teams, but as we kind of accelerated and we could see the value and show the value, it was just essentially, what can we do with more? And fortunately, that has continued to this day.
Great stuff. And Damien, so the results delivery and visible results as a consequence of taking this approach at Vodafone, how did that work for Datadog?
Well, I mean, very similarly. Basically, we also started small. I think that's the best way to start, is like small increments. Start trying out new stuff, and I guess we started from a team that was like kind of the infrastructure catch-all. They were doing everything that no one else wanted to do in the company, and they were just focusing on those things. And then from there, we started building like a full-blown organization around SRE, because we scaled so much in terms of traffic, technical challenges, but also folks in the engineering department. So we started building an org, and we basically split that org into 2 different, I would say, legs. One of them focusing on resilience, like I mentioned earlier on, and the other one is much more focusing on product reliability. And those are folks, SRE folks, that we embed into either a product team or a product organization. We can also create, like for some cases, dedicated SRE team inside a product organization, and those folks will do the focus on reliability. So we started small and we evolved into like a full-blown organization with like different hierarchy charts.
Wow. And that concept of embedding an SRE team inside a product in order to assist them and onboard them in that way, has that continued for the long term as a something that is repetitive? Or is that something that was at the beginning and got you going, and now that it's established, that's not used? Or
it is something that is long term. It's something that we rely on a daily basis.
Wow. Okay. Yuri, from your involvement and your viewpoint with the customers that you deal with, do the teams that you're dealing with, do they tend to be building the team from scratch in order to deliver the principles, or are they taking a team that has that, or are they what's most common, if there is any commonality?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know that I think there's not a single thing that is most common. I think we in CRE, because we work with kind of our biggest Google Cloud customers, we see a variety of things. We have seen folks where they're sort of in the beginning of the journey, and they'll say, we're going to create a new team. We're going to call it SRE. We're going to do it sort of by the book, and we're going to just follow the workbook. Yeah. And like, honestly, that makes our life easier, because we could just say like, hey, do the thing. Like, here's the blueprint, follow it. And that's pretty straightforward. But most companies don't have the luxury of doing that, right? Most of the time I mean, just like what Welly was saying, right? Like and what you were saying about Vodafone, like the stuff is there, right? There's people, there's infrastructure, there's services, there's customers, money's flowing. You can't just like start from, you don't have the opportunity to just like start from nothing. And so where a lot of folks come to us and they say is, they might find an inflection point where it makes sense to start something because of maybe a cloud migration or a refactoring or a re-engineering effort or something like that.
Yeah.
But often it's just a matter of, hey, we have this thing, how can we do it better? And so where we're with customers a lot is actually folks that don't even necessarily want or to have an SRE team. They'll just say, we just want to do things better. We want to improve our life right now. What can we do today? Forget org changes, forget titles, forget like big things. How can we make small improvements that'll make our life better today? And honestly, just the practice of having quantifiable measures of reliability that focus on user happiness and user experience as the primary motivator, makes a big difference. Because what starts to fall out from that is, well, let's prioritize our work based on what actually users care about. Let's alert on those things that make users happy or unhappy versus, I don't know, stuff in the infrastructure that our users don't even never see, that never really makes its way to them, right? Alert on the symptoms, not what we think the root causes might be. And so you quickly see an improvement in their ability to deliver reliability features. Their alert fatigue goes down because there's so many fewer alerts because you're really just triggering alerts on those things that really matter. And even just doing those two small things, right? Having a quantifiable measure of reliability as it matters to your users and alerting on that and not everything else, we see that folks can quickly have some quick wins, and then it sort of spreads from there.
Fabulous. And so that's brilliant. I mean, thinking of that and thinking of taking that approach of the focus on the things that matter to the customer and the value. When Vodafone took that approach and went in this direction, I'm all about the useful examples for the folks that are listening, and so they can think, oh yeah, I can look out for doing that thing, or I can look out for not doing that thing. Kind of, what were the first tangible results and the first tangible output that you saw that made you think that is as a result of us going down this road of that focus that Yuri mentioned of customer, the customer experience and the delivery of reliable service? Us taking this decision is the reason why we've got this thing here. Was there any examples of that you had?
Yeah, sure. So one of them, funny enough, was around observability. So one of them is we looked at, so we started, we had some tooling, but the challenge was that it wasn't going directly to the developers. So, kind of we get our prod alerts, but, the people that built the code weren't there because obviously we'd insourced everything at that point. And, that was fine, that it was kind of calling teams out, getting people on. We didn't have like a rigorous, call out process to get the developers. Obviously we had the L2 people, but at the end of the day, if we're people developing and there's a lower level issue, we need to get those people on. And so what we did actually was kind of implement self-serve monitoring and alerting. To really just kind of enable the developers as they're pushing their code, as it's going live, to create monitors so they can view as to how it's going. We also kind of took this to the next level and provided like a 50,000 foot view and then automated, individual service performance dashboards. So if we did see any issues, we could see straight away. And through even just doing that, and as well adopting tools that were calling out straight away, and having the right people on the call straight away, obviously keeping everyone else still informed, because that's absolutely still important, because they will still need to do the great job that they do. But by doing that, we actually saw like a 0.5% increase in our availability. So we were starting lower, but there was actually a tangible benefit as to which we could see. And it was only when we started looking at that graph, we were like, oh, what's that going live on those days? And then we could start pinning it. And then the next thing that we saw was when we did, as we're talking about, like infrastructure as code, zero touch environments, everything done through a CI/CD. We could then see another, I think it was a 0.9%, that we could then see increase there. And that was just through the fact that then if there was a release, if there was an issue, all we had to do was click rollback and it would automatically be, it would fix itself. So it's through those kind of two things that we really saw a massive benefit in the implementation of SRE.
Wow. Yeah, and those, I mean, those marginal gains aren't marginal when you amplify them up to the revenue of a business across an entire year. No, we know that for sure. Yeah, same question to you, Damien, really. What were the kind of first, or what have been the tangible outputs of taking this approach and embedding these principles in what Datadog does?
Right. So I think the best visible thing was the raising the awareness around reliability, raising the awareness all the way up to the exec level, and then building that reliability tasks or focuses into our OKRs, which is something that we really advocated for, and like building that SRE org, working with the leadership on this, really helped us not think about doing either reliability or either product features, like building a product that is reliable, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So this is I would say the biggest outcome that we've had. Wow,
fantastic. I've got one eye on time with my MC hat on, just to say to the folk who are listening, if you have questions for the panel, we're going to move to a Q&A in about 5 or 6 minutes time. So please ask those questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. But yeah, please throw your questions in there. They will be seen and heard, and hopefully we can respond to them. Thanks, Damien. And so where are we now, I guess? So we've talked about the first steps. We talked about the things that were active. Yuri, from your point of view, whereabouts are the customers that you're dealing with at now in their journey of it? You know, this had the entire SRE thing. The book was written, it was published, and it had a life cycle. Where are most of your customers at as things stand today in whatever year it is, 2021? Is it?
What year is it indeed?
Remember anymore?
Time is a flat circle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the customers that we work with are still kind of all over the map. So we have some folks that are sort of very much like at the, I don't want to say the bleeding edge of things, but they're very good at what they do. We've published some of those case studies in the books, actually, and because they're in the books, I can speak about them publicly. Evernote and Home Depot have both essentially graduated the customer reliability engineering program. We've basically gotten to a point where there's almost nothing we have left to teach them. And those are two very different companies. I mean, Evernote, obviously, they're sort of a digital native, right? They operate almost entirely in bits and bytes. They're not. For a moment, I know they were selling some hardware products, but I think by and large they're kind of focusing on their core competencies now. And Home Depot obviously is maybe the folks in EMEA may not know who they are, but here in the U.S. they are a huge home improvement store. So I mean, they sell anything from lumber to tools to all the bits you need to literally build a house. And so not a cloud native company, not a digital native, right? Very sort of anchored in the brick and mortar stores and things like that. And both of them have been able to get to a very effective SRE and reliability engineering practice. We have other customers that we work with that are sort of somewhere in the middle, where they care about reliability. They want to have an appropriate reliability for their service. They're starting to understand that measuring reliability should be done with the user in mind first and foremost. And so they're making progress in that area. And then we have folks that are, we still work with folks that are just getting started. They're starting to build out their first, SLIs. They're starting to kind of understand that, hey, like alerting when the CPU goes up is probably not good. That's not going to get us anywhere in terms of actually improving the reliability of our service and reducing the operational load on our teams. So I wish that I could tell you a great answer, like, hey, we did it, we solved it, everyone's there. But that is just clearly
a long road. It's a long road with people at various points on it. And so Llywelyn, from Vodafone's point of view, kind of where you are right now and kind of what's next? What's the biggest thing next on your agenda, I guess?
Sure. So the way we kind of look at SRE as a discipline. So I work for systems engineering, and I mentioned at the start that I'm an SRE manager. So the way we've done is we've actually grown out with the teams. So we started off with a platform team and a resiliency team. So one building out the infrastructure, the other one ensuring that all of the environments are stable and suitable and trying to increase that reliability. Then we moved out into performance and chaos engineering. And I think, Damien, you mentioned some of that stuff. And then the next step so those three have been there for quite a while, or for a few years now. But the ones we just started branching out to is persistence and release. So looking at the performance around all of our databases, but also kind of including layers of things like caching and things like that. And then release engineering. So how do we get to that point where we can enable 10,000 deployments a day, and also ensure that we have that really robust CI process to ensure that we can capture any issues before they start. And lastly, we already have a security team, but we're also having one inbuilt within SRE as well. But the idea is that again we can catch issues in build, as they're being developed, as opposed to if they're in one of the lower environments or something like that. So yeah, that's where we are. And then kind of next steps is trying to essentially internally open source what we've done. So obviously I work for the UK, but there's many other opcos all trying to all adopting the digital presence, all trying to accelerate, all at different levels of maturity. And the next challenge for us will be internal open sourcing, so that we can share everything that we've done and collectively as a unit across the globe globally improve.
Nice. Spot on. And I've just looked at the number of questions that we've got coming in, and I'm just looking at the time that we've got available to try and get through a few of those that we've got. And I think we can get through a few of them if we're all right, and folk don't mind contributing to those. I was going to start with one from Daniel in the chat, which was, what would you say is the best way to kind of help business people and those that are going to have to make that decision understand the value of SRE teams and practices? We heard, Welly, from you that it was the practical deliverable examples of you've seen a change in the improvement in reliability. Is that what, I mean, Damien, from your point of view, when you're pushing these principles and making Datadog shape a certain way, is that what it is? Is it practical output of the change, even as a small change in that direction that would be the right one?
Yeah, to me, I would say it's either a practical output or like a demonstration of how big of a failure we can have. And again, this is where like some of my teams are focusing at the moment. It's on chaos engineering. We try to to demonstrate that the assumption that we have around failure for a system are not always right. And like what we think is going to happen do not always happen this way once the failure is injected into the system. And this can really make a difference when you discuss with business folks, because you are able to show them look, we thought about this risk, we actually injected that failure, and what we thought about is not what happened. So we need to invest more into cutting this risk from our systems.
Makes sense. And we had a couple of pre-submitted questions, which I think we've kind of answered during the panel, which was, what's the biggest cultural shift in achieving success via this way? And if you're starting the journey again, where would you go? The common theme we've heard repeatedly is start where you are. Start today. You can start small and start on whatever you've got with whoever you've got and wherever you might be in measuring something, seeing the performance of it, and then looking at how you can make progress to the principles in this way. Cool. The next question that we had, and that was on the list that I thought we could get to, was the typical makeup of the skills in your SRE teams. Welly, I was going to ask you that question about what it looked like to start with and what it is now, and then come to Yuri for it. So yeah, Welly, for you.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we kind of form systems engineering. We look at SRE as a discipline. So the idea is that we're all comfortable in what everyone else is doing. So essentially, what we'll look for is things like Python. Infrastructure as code tooling, so CloudFormation, Terraform, also obviously experience with cloud tooling or cloud providers, so AWS. But the other thing is, as well as kind of experience either from a development or an operations perspective, being able to kind of understand and have kind of overcome some of those typical challenges, but in a really smart way. So those are some of the things that we look for, and then obviously we have kind of specialities. Which some people can be mapped to, but the idea is that by having the basis of kind of cloud providers, a development language, so we do have some Go, we do have some Ruby, all that other stuff. But the idea is that by having that core basis, you can actually kind of be quite comfortable in the teams and move around. Because the important thing is to continue developing, regardless, even if you're a senior, move into another team and see what happens there.
Good stuff. Thank you for that. And Yuri, kind of the commonalities you see again across customers, is there a set of skills that you see repetitively, or is it as customized to the environment as well, you mentioned?
I think it really does matter on what the environment looks like and what your requirements are. I think at a very high level, we would recommend that the team. So I think there's one thing that folks sometimes get confused on, is that it's important to have a mix of skills on a team. It's going to be impossible to find the mix of skills in an individual, right? So you're not looking for a team of individuals, all of whom have a great mix of skills. What you really want is a team that has that mix of skills. And so you're going to be hiring or recruiting folks, or promoting whatever. Some folks that have a very strong software engineering background, who are very comfortable, writing code, reading code, understanding what code is doing. And then you're going to have another set of folks that are very comfortable in a systems engineering background, which is, how do big systems work? How do distributed systems work? Things like concurrency, consistency, those kind of skills and that kind of understanding is going to be really important. How to architect systems, how to reverse engineer systems. That's not the same thing as writing code, but you need that mix of skills on a team in order to be able to run services at scale effectively.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you for that. And so, I mean, that comes on a little bit onto Adrian Tillier's question in the chat about when to enable SRE in an organization where small companies might not think it's a priority. Damien, from your point of view, I know we're not small now, we're not massive by any means, but it took us a long time to get even what you might call medium-sized. At what point did Datadog begin? How early did we embed the SRE principles?
I would say as early as possible. So we've started we built a product that enables our customers to be reliable. So we try to be as reliable as possible from the get-go. This was core to building the product. And then as soon as Google published the handbook, we got in touch with them. We started discussing with them. We started looking at the right way to implement some of those tools into our engineering culture. But the short answer for the question is as soon as possible. The more reliability you build into your product at the very beginning of your journey, the easier it is in the long run, I guess, to have it as something that is there that you don't have to build now.
Yeah, a founding principle you can rely on throughout all of the decisions that get made and all the different bits there. Yeah, makes total sense. It makes sense. Fabulous. We're right at the point at which the booked time is up, and that I know folk will start to drop off in numbers as people have other meetings to go to in our distributed virtual world. And so we'll just say thank you very much for everybody for being in the panel. Huge thanks, Llywelyn, for joining and representing Vodafone. Thank you so much. Likewise, Damien, thank you for joining and representing the way that Datadog has taken this stuff. And Yuri, thank you for representing Google and the founders of the approach. Really appreciate that. There were a few questions about recordings. There will be, I believe, a recording of this made available at some point in the future. Have a look for it. We've got our YouTube channel and we've got our main site. You can find all sorts of things on the blog section of the Datadog site that reference a lot of these stuff. So yeah, there you go. Thanks so much, everybody who attended. Hope it was interesting. Hope you all got a lot out of it. Yeah. Feel free to get in touch with anybody at Datadog at any time to ask any questions you might have, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Thanks, everyone.
Great stuff.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.